Welcome, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about the middle passive indicative in the present system. And for further details, you can find that in Mastronarde's units 11 and 23. 11 goes into the meaning of the middle passive, and 23 just gives you the endings for the me verbs. So let's get going. Okay, so we're familiar with the endings of the middle passive already because these are the endings of the deponent verbs, which I've been calling the my verbs. And in the omega group, we've seen that they are omai, a, etai, ometha, estha, ontai. So omai, a, etai, ometha, estha, ontai. And then the infinitive is esthai. Those are the endings that you put on omega verbs when they are my verbs or deponents or middle passive endings. Now, me verbs, we didn't really go over how they actually do their middle passives. We haven't met any yet, but we will in this section. But you'll see that the endings are effectively the same. So the endings are my, psi, tai, metha, sthe, entai. Effectively the same. The only real difference is the second person, where the omega verbs have a and the me verbs have psi. But we'll see that this is actually something that's the same. So here is a sort of overview of how the endings of verbs actually relate to each other. And so on the yellow group here, we're dealing with omega verbs, and in this green group, we're dealing with me verbs. And basically the endings are the same. So we have the omega verbs, and it's omega, and then the sigma, a ends in a ace, ends in a sigma, right? And then over in the me verbs, we see that it is actually a sigma. Third person is where things are interesting, because in an older form of the third person, it was esse in the omega verbs. And if we notice over here, it's c, sigma, iota, and movable nu. Similarly here, esse is the same thing. So what happens then is the sigma falls out in esse, leaving you with epsilon iota. And that is actually why the third person is a, because it was originally esse. And this is going to be useful because some of the verbs we might encounter in Homer will have this older form, esse. So, but here you can see what the logic is. Esse, sigma falls out, you're left with epsilon iota. And then, so it's the same kind of ending that you had in the me verbs. Or in the plural, it's basically the same, right? The vowels for the omega verbs and no vowels for the me verbs except for asi, right? So it's men, te, asi. It's amen, eta, usi. All right. Now in the middle passive, or the deponent endings, in the omega verbs, it's omai, e, etai, ometha, estha, ontai. But again, the second person is originally essi, which then if you look over in the me verbs, you have my, psi, tai, ometha, metha, sthe, ontai. And the second person is psi. Well, it's in the omega verbs, it's essi originally, and the sigma will fall out, and then you're left with epsilon, alpha, yota. And if you'll remember your vowel assimilations, epsilon plus alpha yota gives you a. So it is actually the same ending, right? And again, we might see some omega verbs in Homer randomly with their older form ending, something si. All right. So anyway, so the me verbs have my, psi, tai, metha, sta, entai, and the omega verbs have omai, e, etai, ometha, esta, ontai. As far as the infinitives go, the omega verbs in the active it's ein, epsilon, iota, nu, and in the middle it's estai. In the me verbs, the infinitive is nai. That's the ending, will end in nai. And the middle passive would be sthai. So again, the endings are very, very similar. Only difference is that the omega verbs tend to have a gluing vowel, either omicron or epsilon, and the me verbs don't. Okay, they just stick right onto the stem. All right, let's move on. All right, so we'll remember then that the deponent verbs have these endings, my verb endings, but they're not going to be middle passive, they're going to be active. So the ones that we've seen before, bulamai or bulesomai, I wish, I want, I intend to do something. Gignomai or genesomai, I am born, I become, I am. Erkomai or lusomai, I go, right? So these are all deponents and they end in my, and these are omega deponent verbs. Okay, now let's look at how we make my verbs or the passive, middle passive endings, in this case, deponent verbs for me verbs, because we've only really looked at omega verbs. But here are two deponent me verbs, meaning that they look like they're middle passive, but in fact they are active in meaning. And these two verbs are dunamai, to be able, and epistemai, to know. So we're getting a lot of verbs that mean to know so far. So dunamai, you can see it's going to be dunamai. You knock off the mai, and that gives you the stem duna. And then you put the endings on. So my, psi, tai, metha, stha, entai. Now notice in the second person, you have the option of psi or I. And notice, again, if we took off that sigma, we would have alpha plus alpha iota, which would generate the alpha with the iota subscript. So there we have it. Dunamai, dunasai, or duna. Dunatai, dunamatha, dunastha, dunantai. Right now, epistemai means I know or know how to do something. I understand. And again, you get rid of the my, and you get epista, epistamai, epistasai, or epista. Again, same reason. The sigma falls out. You get alpha plus alpha iota gives you alpha iota subscript. So epistatai, and then epistamatha, epistesta, epistantai. And in both cases, the infinitive is sthai, right? So dunasthai or epistasthai. All right, so these are how you do me verb middle passives. You're just going to knock off the my, etc. If it's this is already deponents. But let's see what we have when we keep going. Let's talk a little bit about, well, just to give you a taste of what the middle passive is, and then we're going to go through the forms, and then we'll give you some examples of what that means. But in general, we have the active voice, which is when the subject is doing the verb, right? It's the agent of the verb. In the middle voice, the subject acts in some special way with reference to him or herself, or for his or her benefit, or upon him or herself. So, for example, in our story, Xenophamus and Hegestratus threw themselves into the water, right? He autus riptusi. They threw themselves into the water. So that was the active form of the verb, riptusi, and then the reflexive pronoun, he autus, themselves. Right? So they threw themselves into the water. But we could have just used the middle form there. So riptontai, right? Just use the middle form and have this mean exactly the same thing. They threw themselves into the water. Riptontai. Okay. So here, some examples taken from Mastronarde. Pathomai. So patho, remember, means I urge or I persuade. And then in the middle, pathomai, I persuade myself. I get myself persuaded, or I am persuaded by somebody. Ultimately, I obey them, right? Ferretai, it is carried. So ferro means I carry. Ferretai, it is carried, or it carries itself, sorry. It carries itself. It gets carried. It is carried. So we're moving from the middle, I persuade myself, I get myself persuaded, and then the passive, I am persuaded. Similar here with ferretai, it carries itself, it gets itself carried, it is carried. Right? These are all ways of dealing with the sort of blurring between the middle and the passive. So the passive voice then is when the action of the verb is operating on the subject by some other agent. So in the middle, it's the self is doing the operating on itself, right? Where the passive, something else is acting on the subject. But we'll have some examples so we'll be able to see it a bit better. Now, the verb to stop is a good example of the active and middle passive voice to see what the differences are. Because in English, it has the same kind of blurring. So I stop someone else, then it's pao, active. I stop myself, then that would be pao mai, I stop myself. Or I am stopped by somebody else, that's pao mai as well, but we're going to have an agent of somebody else doing that action. So that's going to be the difference. All right, but we'll look at some examples with pao. Okay, so here we have active. He is stopping the horse, right? Or he's making the horse stop. So pawe ton hippon. He's making the horse stop. He's stopping the horse. So in the middle, he's making the horse stop for his benefit, right? So pawetai ton hippon. Or the horse is not stopping itself, is not stopping by itself. So ho hippos uk pawetai. So the horse is not stopping automatos by itself. Someone else is doing it. So, but nonetheless, the horse is stopping itself, and that's the middle. Ho hippos uk pawetai is not stopping itself. And in the passive, you have the horse is being stopped by him. Ho hippos pawetai hupo autu. So this is the phrase for the agent. The horse is stopped, pawetai, by somebody else, by him, hupo autu, or hupo anthropu, by the man. All right, so you get the difference. So active is the subject is making someone else stop. The middle is the subject is making itself stop. And then the passive is the subject is being stopped by some other subject, some other agent. Okay. All right. So here's an example. Ho aner epitokuon bale tasphairas. We've seen this before. That's one of our examples from way, way back. So the man is striking balls at the dog, or he's throwing balls at the dog, right? So ho aner epitokuon, so again at the dog or against the dog. Bale, he's throwing or hitting. Tas the balls. He gets spheres from sphiras. Now, here is the passive form. Hai sphirai hupo tu andros balontai epitokuon. So the balls are being thrown, balontai, by the man, hupo tu andros epitokuon, against the dog. All right, so in the active, the man is throwing the balls at the dog. So ho aner epitokuon bale tasphairas. And in the passive, the balls are being thrown at the dog by the man. And so it's haisphirai hupotu andros, the agent, hupotu andros, balontai, are being thrown epitokuon, against the dog. Another way of looking at it is, well, let's look at it from the dog's perspective, right? Because the dog is being struck by the balls, right? The man is striking the dog with the balls, like he's hitting him with the balls. So that would be ho aner bale tokuon sphirais, with the balls. So ho aner, the man, bale, strikes, tokuon, the dog, tais sphirais, with the balls. All right, so now we want to make that passive. Tokuon balontai hupo tu andros tais sphirais. So the dog is being hit or being struck by the man, hupo tu andros, with the balls, tais sphirais. You see that? So to kuon, the dog, is being hit, balontai, by the man, hupo tu andros, with the balls, tais sphirais. So the dative is being used here as the instrument, the thing that's hitting or doing the action or helping out with the action. But when it's a person that's actually doing it, you use hupo plus the genitive. So you have, when it's not a person, you use the dative of the thing that's doing the verb. And if it is a person, you use hupo plus the genitive. All right. Okay, let's see what we have next. All right. So now let's think about the me verbs. And especially histemi is particular. It's a perfect verb in the sense that it has all of its parts. But because it has all of its parts, it's also kind of tricky because of how it's going to be used. So we've seen it in the active, and it means to make stand, right? So histemi, I make stand. So the image here is, of course, of these clothespins making the big clothespin stand up. I make stand. So that's the active. Now, the same action. So now we're going to think about it in terms of the middle passive voice. So the action is not changed. It's now the kind of perspective we're looking at. So now we're in the middle passive, and I'm underlined passive to mean that the passive meaning is being emphasized here. So I am being made to stand, right? So histamai, I'm being made to stand by somebody else, by the teacher, by the police, whatever. I'm being made to stand. Okay, and notice the thing that's really important is that it's a process. I am being made to stand. Um, they're making me stand up. Um, is another way you could say, yeah, he or she is making me stand up. I'm being made to stand. All right. Now, if we move to the passive, from the passive to the middle, here is I make myself stand, right? Or I am in the process of standing. Okay. So I make myself stand. I am in the process of standing. Now, we can't yet say I am standing or I stand yet, because that requires us to move to the different we have to go to the perfect or the aorist, right? But right now we can say I am getting up or I am in the process of standing. Present is always an ongoing action. So I'm in the process of standing. I am making myself stand up, or I make myself stand up, right? But the point is that it's the action of standing up. When we look at the perfect is the result of an action. So to stand is the consequence of making yourself stand up, right? So to be standing, I'm standing. Well, it means that I was in the process of standing up and now I am standing, right? So for as far as where we are in our Greek, we don't know how to say that yet. But we can say I am standing up in the process of standing up. Okay? But to say I am standing is a different thing. All right. But anyway, the point here is that this is the middle, right? I'm making myself stand up. That's the middle. All right. Now, okay, so here let's look at tithemi and hiemi. So tithemi is to put her to place in the active, and hiemi is to send her to shoot in the active. And the middle, passive, you can have tithemai means to be placed. I'm being placed, or I'm placing myself, or I'm placing it for myself. So I'm placing my suitcase somewhere. You can use the middle that will capture the my in it. I'm being sent for hiemi, or hiemai. I'm being sent. I am sending something for myself. So hiemi, hiemai. All right. And then the infinitive is tithesthai and hiesthai. Now, I want you to notice that because we memorize our principal parts for the me verbs with the infinitive, this takes care of how do we deal with the my verbs, right? Because we'll notice that the ending, the vowel that you're going to be using to glue on the my verb, the my endings to the stem is the vowel that shows up in the infinitive, right? Because it's tithenai. Remember, tithemi, tithenai. Well, it's tithemai. So it's hiemi, hienai, hiemai. So, and also histemi, histamai, or histanai. So then it was histamai, right? So that memorizing that infinitive with the me verb helps a lot here. So didomi, didonai, right? I give. Well, so in the middle, it's didomai, and middle passive, it's didomai. So it's I am given, or I give for myself. And so you have didomai, didosai, etc. Deiknumi, I show, right? Exhibit, I show. And deiknumai, I am shown, or I show off is a good way to do that one. I show myself off. I show for myself, or I show myself. I expose myself. I exhibit myself. I show off. Um, that's going to be the middle passive of deknumi. So here again we have ago. Now ago is really interesting because ago has active passive, but also has a special meaning in the middle. But here's the active passive version. So here we have, okay, the man and the baby, right? So ho aner to brefos age. So the man leads the baby, right? Ho aner nominative, to brefos baby, got to be accusative, age, he leads. So the man leads the baby. And then we want to say the baby is being led by the man. To brefos agetai, hupo tu andros. So you got to brefos is now the subject. Agetai, the middle passive form, is being led hupo tu andros. So by the man. Hupo plus a genitive, by the man. All right, now here we have the cat and the dog. So he ailuros age tokuon. So the cat age leads tokuon, the dog. He ailuros age tokuon. And then if we want to say in the passive focusing on the dog, then to kuon hupo tes ailuru agetai. So the dog is being led by the cat. Hupo tes ailuru. All right. So active and past, same action. It's an issue of perspective. Who are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the cat or the dog? Are we focusing on the man or the baby? Right. The action's the same. That's the main difference between the active and the passive. Now, what's interesting about age is that it's on that list of verbs that's on the class webpage that has a special meaning, or can have a special meaning when it's in the middle passive form. And that is to marry for men. So agomai, if you're a man, means I marry a woman. So agomai gunaika, I marry a woman. So here you have to get married is what's happening. So it literally means I lead a woman for myself to my house with my parents, whatever, right? So I marry. So that's a special middle passive meaning with the verb ago. And it's usually with men, because only in the ancient Greek concept, men are the ones taking the wife to their house.